Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to Midnight Dark Stories. The night is deep, the stars are hidden, and it's the perfect time for us to gather here and dive into the mysterious and thrilling world of tales. Prepare to be spellbound as we uncover the secrets that lie in the darkness. Let's begin this enchanting journey together. Looking back, he probably had mental health issues, but man, did he scare us, and thinking back on it all, it still makes me feel a little bit uneasy. This happened a few years ago, so some details may not be the clearest in my head, but I'll try to recall this event in its fullest form. So first, let me set up the layout of where it happened. My upstairs hallway has 5 rooms connected to it, in order. From the stairs it goes my sister's room, the bathroom, the office master bedroom, and then my room. At the very end, the stairs led down to the kitchen and share a wall with the bathroom, so you can hear anyone on the stairs quite easily. In addition to this, it's not a new house, so you can hear pretty much everything, because thin walls, loud floors and doors and all that. Now what happened one night was that I had woken up at around midnight or 1 a.m. because I needed to go to the bathroom at some point. With a standard amount of grumbling because I didn't want to leave the warmth of my bed, I got up and walked down the hallway to the bathroom. Everything was perfectly normal, until I went to go and wash my hands. A sound on the stairs made me pause, because it didn't sound like one of the cats. They're fat and old and have a very distinct way of going up and down the stairs. I listened, though, as quick light footsteps ran up the stairs and around the corner to come down the hallway. They ran up and down the hallway twice before stopping in front of the bathroom door, which I couldn't have been more than 3 feet away from. They breathed loudly in and out a few times. Then they ran back down the hall and down the steps into the kitchen, where they stopped making noise. I would have been able to hear them if they continued. I was rightly freaked out because the sounds that I had heard were very clearly made from a little kid, of which there were none in my house. The footsteps were too close together, light and way too quick to be anyone in the house messing with me. And in order to move that fast, anyone who lived there would have had to have made at least twice as much noise, and the only one capable of running as fast as what I'd heard would have been my sister. But again, she couldn't have done it that quietly. I ended up waiting for about 2 hours in that bathroom, before finally coming back out and booking it to my room. Any perpetrators would have been heard if they had tried to return to it or if they were anywhere awake, because our house is very quiet at night. But I heard nothing after that night, no footsteps, no breathing, no activity. The next morning, too, I asked each of my family members individually and separately, so they couldn't talk to each other between my interrogations, if they had gotten up at all last night or if they had heard anything last night too. None of them good liars, and I know when they're telling the truth. So when they all said that they slept through the night, genuinely, I believe them. So we moved into this house 5 years ago. I'd never experienced anything paranormal before. Honestly, I was a hardcore skeptic. It was around 18 months later that I began to experience disturbing paranormal events. I cannot explain, it cannot explain, no matter how much science I read. No, I do not have a history of hallucinations or schizophrenia or anything. I wasn't smoking weed at the time, nor on any other drugs. I was also in my mid-20s at the time. The first incident was on a November night at about 10:50 p.m. Almost all events happened between 10:51 to 2 a.m., but primarily between 11 to 1. For some context, I'd spent the last hour playing Among Us and studying from a Spanish textbook. I would listen to relaxing jazz sometimes and drink some Jack Daniels. I wasn't drunk by any means, but I went to pee. My mind was focused on how clever funny the games were and how I couldn't wait to get back to what I was doing. And when I pulled my trousers up, a noise caught my attention. It was an Alberta Basin shampoo bottle, about 1/3 or just under, full between the taps on the sink. It is a standard British porcelain sink, close to the toilet. But to touch the bottle I would need to extend my arm, bending my elbow. And that night there was no one, nowhere near close enough for contact. But the bottle, it rocked far to the left, to the right, unnaturally, and repeated this motion about 5 times before it came to a standstill in its original position. It wasn't a small wobble, by any means too. It was a slow, intentional rock side to side. The bottle should not have been able to rock so far for either side either without falling over. But my bathroom is tiny. I couldn't touch the bottle, let alone cause it to rock the way that it did. The window was closed, so there was no breeze in anybody else in the room. I tried to replicate it another time by blowing hard on the bottle, flapping my arms and holding myself in the same position as when it happened. But I couldn't touch or move the bottle at all, even with the generous leeway. I couldn't touch that bottle, and in short, it wasn't me, and genuinely it ruined my night. Because this incident absolutely terrified me. A couple of days later, I was in the same bathroom, washing my hands at about the same time at night, when I experienced a sudden and intense sensation that something sinister was behind me and staring at me. I looked up at the mirror and couldn't see anything behind me, but I just felt like something was there. I was too afraid to move. I finished washing my hands after a minute or so, and when the feeling began to fade, I quickly left the bathroom. But this became a regular occurrence, particularly in the kitchen. In the bathroom, I felt something there, or that something was watching me and sort of attempting to interact with me too. The presence was somewhat imposing and dark. I could never see it, but I just felt like it was there. My partner didn't believe me when I told him about these incidents and would go to bed before me, so he never witnessed them at first. I believe this presence was a man, and for a while thought that it might have been the deceased elderly man who used to live here. He was placed in a care home, age 95, and was known as a nasty, horrible old man. The man passed away at some point. I'm not sure when, but it was either during the incidents or towards the end of them. Additionally, we had a living room carpet, and as these incidents increased in frequency, I began to hear something plucking at the carpet in the corner by the door when I moved the curtain. There was nothing ever there, and the noise always stopped. But this is where my partner comes in, because he sat up later occasionally and he heard the noise too. Mind you, I didn't prompt him. I heard it and remained quiet until he picked up on it, and I told him that was the noise that I was hearing. He went to investigate and he couldn't see anything. And this is what made him suspicious too. Now we have a rabbit, but we checked on him. He was in his cage eating in the next room while the noises happened, unless he could teleport. Pluck the carpet before our eyes while invisible and teleport back into his cage. Then it definitely wasn't him. Since then, I lifted the floor to see if anything could have plucked the carpet from beneath the floorboards. But the floorboards are locked tight, and honestly, it would have been impossible to touch the underside of the carpet or underlay or whatever. This may be my mind, manifesting fear too. But I also began to have horrible dreams about an old man with beady, shiny black eyes, a partially bald head and white hair in a forest. I recognized the layout from a forest far away in my hometown that I used to ride a horse in. These dreams were disturbing to say the least, and the men were not like ordinary people. I felt they were trying to toy with me before they killed me, and one night I woke up to feel someone standing over me and another. I woke up and briefly glimpsed black writing all over the wall on the landing, and when I blinked, it vanished. I was honestly terrified and often felt something on the landing or in the room too. I had no history of sleep paralysis. Before moving to this house, my partner told me that he believed that whatever it was enjoyed scaring me and was feeding on my fear. I tried after this to not to be afraid and to confront it, which honestly worked to some degree in the end. But one of the worst incidents was when I knew the man was there. I felt him standing about to FD away from my computer chair. He liked to stand over me and sometimes breathe on me while I was gaming. I was playing World of Warcraft. I remember exactly what I was doing. I knew that he was trying to get my attention, and so I ignored him. I forced myself to calm down. Then he moved closer, and I heard a huff as though someone breathed heavily through their mouth, only inches from my ear. I took my headset off and looked around, but the presence had disappeared, probably into the kitchen. I felt like he wanted me to follow him, so I did. My attention was guided out of the window, as though he was leading me there. I went to the window and looked out, and I swear to you that I saw a shape out there that looked like an adult male of about 6', wearing a gray hoodie and gloves, standing near my back fence, as though he had just climbed over. Could I have been mistaken? Yes, for sure, but I tried to run from the window and ended up in a freeze mode by the kitchen door because for some reason, I just couldn't move. I tried so hard to get away because I thought this man was going to break into my house and attack me or something. I don't know where the man was, but after about 2 minutes I finally made it into the living room tomorrow and I went back to check. The man and the real man were both gone. A strange part of me believed, though, that the man chased the real figure off. In fact, I felt as though he had tried to save me that night, and I guess I became more sympathetic to him. There was another incident, though, which could be explained other wise, but my partner wasn't convinced. We had a small children's desk with 2 wooden chairs behind us. We stacked the chairs on the table while our daughter was upstairs while we were on the computers. The chairs just suddenly came crashing to the floor. Mind you, they were not precariously stacked or anything. The doors were open, and there was a bit of a breeze, but there's just no way the wind would have been able to knock over the small wooden chairs to the floor like that. This also happened in broad daylight in the late afternoon. Now, over time this all began to fade. I feared the man less. I often felt his presence in the kitchen standing far too close to me. One time I even felt a sudden icy blow down the left side of my neck. Our house is cold and drafty, so although I convinced myself that it was him, it could have been something else. I admit my nightmares, though they began to disappear. I would hear him sometimes walking upstairs, and I sensed him go into my daughter's bedroom just to look at her. He never did anything in there, but my partner also experienced something going on in the house on several occasions. But he is still somewhat of a skeptic. Eventually, though, everything just stopped one day, but after the man disappeared, we had issues with like animal footsteps on the stairs of worrying. It was weird and creepy. It sort of sounded like a cat running up and down, I guess. The first time it happened we couldn't see anything. The plucking noise continued, and it was around. This time our house rabbit, for some reason, jumped out of his cage and we had at least 2 to 3 incidences where he bolted up the stairs and went into our bedroom. He was running about, and this was really abnormal for him. Of course we blamed him and locked his cage tightly so he couldn't escape, but the noise continued. My ex was also woken by the noise one night and investigated them only to find the rabbit in his cage and the noises continuing. The noises and the incidences have stayed for quite some time now. Thankfully, the house now feels at peace, but honestly, that was a deeply terrifying event that actually ruined my life and made me feel really unsafe in my own home at night. I'm still not completely sure what it was all about or what it all was, but that's why I'm here. What do you think that it could have been? This is the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. So a couple of years back, I matched with a girl on Tinder from the same city. She offered that I would come over and watch a movie at her place. Everything was going pretty well until she put on the movie. It was weird. It was like I couldn't focus on the movie because it was in black and white. Who would put on a movie in black and white? Right. But anyway, all I could do was think about how I was going to get her upstairs to her room so that we could hook up. I'm a terrible person, I know, But in any case, we were sitting on what I call an L couch in her living room where we were watching this movie. The edge of the couch where I was sitting was in the corner of the room. Hard to explain, but basically where I was sitting was the corner of the room with only walls behind me, and I was being quite patient and didn't push her too much. But there came a point where I had enough and was about to ask her if we could go upstairs. But before I could even move my lips, someone or something yelled in my ear to get out genuinely. It sounded like a male and extremely sort of demonic. Before anyone questions my sanity too, or if I was under the influence or anything. Both are out of the question. I've never had this happen to me, and I could feel the vibration on my eardrum from the voice as if somebody had cut their hands and yelled in your ear anyway. Naturally, when this happened, I got up and questioned everything. Did you hear that? Is there anyone else in the house? She claimed that she didn't hear anything and sort of smiled at me and played it off that I was just nervous. I was starting to get uncomfortable and I could feel the energy of the room shifting, and I was genuinely ready to leave without hooking up or anything. Until she asked me if I wanted to go upstairs. I was obviously still stunned and confused and asked her straight up if she has ever encountered anything paranormal in this house. She said no, but then continued to tell me a really horrible story about how one of her sea cousins was murdered. Chopped up and pieces of her were sent to the family, or her house being one of them, and I mean it's kind of wild, right? But still that wouldn't explain the male voice that I heard. Because her cousin was allegedly a young female. Still a little scared and confused. I should have left, but she was pretty and now inviting me to go upstairs to her room. But this is where things get just really scary for me. Because I know myself and would never do this. But anyways, when we got to her room, she invited me to take a shower with her. At this point, I knew that we were going to hook up and was eager to get it over with and leave. Normally I would have joined her in the shower, but for some reason I was still on edge and checking over my shoulder every second, like a weirdo. I told her that I would wait on her bed for her. Now I remember sitting on her bed, just sort of looking around the room. But the next thing that I know is that it's morning. Which means that apparently I passed out on the bed before she even got back into the room. Obviously that is very odd. I was waiting to hook up and leave. No intentions of sleeping over at all, and no drugs or alcohol involved whatsoever. I couldn't remember how I fell asleep, which to me is just incredible. When I woke up in the morning, she also acted like nothing had happened. She said that I was sleeping like a baby and she didn't want to wake me up. I don't know. I feel like whatever was there that night was protecting her or didn't want me to have sex with her. It was so weird and I would like to hear anyone's thoughts on what this could have been. This is the only time that something like this has ever happened to me and, like I said, I get it. It's a weird one. This happened in India in the mid-90s. I was staying in an average, mid-budget hotel in Doam, India. I went out for the night, bumped into a couple of lads from Birmingham earlier in the night and went back to my hotel about midnight. Now next to my hotel was a small, lean-to-tight food shack. For want of a better description, I called in for a last drink before bed and I was surprised to see the two Birmingham chaps from earlier. "What brought you here?" I asked. The taxi driver recommended it to us. They said anyway. There was only the three of us in there and suddenly I was aware of another person on it by himself, who I hadn't seen come in. I introduced myself and asked him what his name was. "They call me the Doctor." He replied, "Oh man, we've got some dodgy fantasists." I thought, go on. Then indulge me. "Why do they call you the Doctor?" I asked. "Because I sought people out from bad trips," is what he said. Me, being puzzled and looking around, couldn't see any beneficiary of his so-called special skills. So I asked him who he was sorting. He gestured at the waiter, a Jamaican man who had served us, and seemed pretty normal and healthy to me really. So I thought that he was just some Walter M.T.I. sort of type character. But it didn't matter to me, as I was off to bed in a minute anyway. He then rolls a joint in front of me and invites me and the two Birmingham guys to take some. I think I've only tried once or twice in my life, so I decline. He's pretty persistent though, so I think, what the heck? What harm can 2 or 3 drawers do to me? Anyway, I take about 3 drawers, along with the 2 Birmingham lads who, by this time, are all sitting at the same table. And within about 60 seconds my brain has gone to complete tenuous and my eyes are spinning like sports orders. My last abiding memory in the restaurant. My last abiding memory in the restaurant is this guy looking into my eyes, wagging his index finger at me and saying, "That's why they call me the doctor." My mind is absolutely gone. I don't know if I'm or the other 2 guys are being set up to be robbed or worse, and I realize that I've only got seconds to act. I just gotta go for a pee. I managed to water out before staggering out of the place, my legs like Bambi on ice and stumbling into my hotel just yards away that night. I lay awake from midnight until 6 a.m. completely hallucinating. I've never taken anything before, like acid or whatever, but that's what I imagined that it would be like. I never did meet the 2 Birmingham guys again, so I really don't know what transpired after I left. I do sometimes think about them and I really do hope that they made it out okay. This took place about 5 years ago in the house that I'm currently living in. My friend and I, we were waiting in my living room for my dad because he was a ride to another friend's place. We were both 15 at the time, so we didn't have our licenses yet. He eventually poked his head around the corner to let us know that he was ready. We both got up and walked around the corner to the den in my kitchen, which leads to my back door. And as we entered the kitchen and turned towards the back, we both saw the side of my dad going around the corner to my back door. To the back left side of my kitchen from where we were standing, there is an entryway with 3 short steps that goes down to a small landing area where you can access the basement of the door to my backyard. We followed right behind him, but as we turned the corner he just was not there. The back door was still shut and locked, which meant that the only way that he could have gone was the basement. I thought that this was very strange, because he would have had to have sprinted down those steps in order to get out of our sight in that short of time frame. But neither of us heard any commotion at this point. I was weirded out but figured that he was just pulling some sort of a joke on us. I began calling down the steps to him for a good 15 seconds with no response. At this point, my friend and I were starting to get slightly annoyed because our buddy had been waiting on us for a good amount of time. I turned to look at my friend with a confused expression when all of a sudden we heard my dad begin to whistle from the living room where we had just come from. We both sprinted up the short landing through my kitchen and into the living room where we found my dad. I instantly started freaking out, asking him how he was able to get from the back landing area back to our living room so quickly. And he explained that he never entered the kitchen after calling us, but instead turned the other way, to my mom's office, to let her know that we were leaving. Well, my friend and I both clearly saw my dad, and to this day it is still one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me. The apparition. It was crystal clear, not foggy or transparent, like the way Hollywood makes ghosts look, and was an exact replica of my dad. I want to take you back to 2009. Our family, we had been looking for a new house for a while now, and near a busy highway stood this beautiful house, 2 stories, big front and backyard, 3 spacious bedrooms, and so on. Some strange stuff did occur relatively early on, like computers booting on by itself or water starting to run by itself. But the real horror began when my older sister decided to make a wire board. Essentially draw one herself in a piece of paper and use a glass to communicate. My younger sister got scared when she found out what was happening and kicked the wire paperboard away. And well, soon after everything got a lot worse. My sisters shared the biggest bedroom. At the end of their room was a sort of very little closet room where they placed boxes and such. The door was always closed, but it refused to stay closed after that. and I mean no matter what, it kept opening. My dad eventually had grown annoyed of it, and he put something in between the door and the wall so that it would stay closed. At one point, everyone was in their bed, and I would hear the chairs downstairs sliding across the ground. I swear on everything to that everyone was in bed, as I was the last one to leave the living room. And not soon after that same night, I would hear this awful sound as if something was in the walls and flooring just tearing it apart. It was so loud, and I remember hiding under my blankets because I was terrified. Another time, we were all in the living room and my mom had some small figurines on the table. We were watching TV with the dog on the couch, when suddenly one of the figures goes flying across the room as if somebody had just thrown it. My mom jokingly said, "Hey, no need to get aggressive." She and Dad always believed in the paranormal and just joked about it. One morning, my sister hysterically ran to my parents' room and she swore that the eating utensils started moving by themselves. Our dog started becoming more wary and aggressive, not towards us, but to furniture and doors, weirdly especially the basement. At one point, my parents screamed at night and I went to check. They sat there in shock, I think, and I asked what was wrong, and they claimed that there stood a black figure in the corner of the room. Things kept happening too. We heard piano and violin sounds in the attic. We didn't own any instruments, though. My parents at one point saw a black shadow move across the wall towards the window and disappear. My posters were ripped off of the wall on multiple occasions. Plushies in my sister's room would sometimes lay in a circle, and that caused my mom to call Dad hysterically here. My dad told me recently that in that house, at one time he woke up with my mom's hand around his neck as she stared at him with a smile and was laughing silently before she just disappeared. My mom said that she often saw the figure a humanoid, fully black figure with a veil. She often had scratches and bite marks too. In winter of 2010, the boiler in the house broke and we just simply moved. Everything kept going wrong, and when we moved I started getting light attacks. I would often have scratches that I had first brushed off as to me to scratching myself on my sleep deep. But one time I came home and greeted my mom and made like a hissing sound from pain. I lifted up my jacket and hoodie and clear as day. There were 3 brand new scratch marks. They were on my hips, just bleeding. I remember at one point I put some coins on my bed. I don't remember why. I walked to the living room to ask my parents something, and as I turned around, I hear a sort of clanging noise because one of the coins somehow got thrown towards me. Now there's a lot more that I could go on with, but I'll stop here, as I don't want this to get too long. Stuff like this still happens at times, too, and unfortunately in 2012, my sister middle child passed away due to a brain hemorrhage, and, weirdly, when she died, everything sort of calmed down a bit. Maybe she's protecting us or something. I really do hope so. But if you have any questions or want any additional stuff, then please do feel free to ask in the comments below. There's plenty more for me to talk about, but like I said, I'll leave it here. I started this back in September last year, but I never got around to sharing it. I am now, though, due to an uncomfortable situation again, so I have to get some context out of the way. First, let me start off by saying that I live in an apartment complex by a golf course or country club on the edge of town. Since not many people live in this area, it can get pretty quiet at night too. The complex is built partially into a small hill at the end of the road, with my apartment being on the back corner of the building on the ground floor. So the bottom of the windows in the living room and both bedrooms start literally a few inches above the ground outside. There is a sort of small trail behind my apartment building that goes through a small wooded patch. I don't have much of a view, since my living room windows face a good 15 to 20 foot patch of grass before a tree line separating it from a few houses on the next street over. But this story, it has been ongoing for the last couple of months. Not entirely sure if this is just parano or coincidental too. Last summer, my family moved into a house on the next street over, a couple of houses down from my apartment. I've only seen one middle-aged man and a dog so far. But I was taking my Shih Tzu Hailey outside one day while he was out in his backyard, just standing with his arms crossed, swaying side to side. It was sort of like an NPC character in 2000s video games waiting to be interacted with. The dumpster shed area is in view of his backyard too. We made eye contact, so I sort of awkwardly waved and then just looked at my phone while Harley did her business. But I could tell from my peripheral vision that he didn't look away from us. We have the same breed of dogs, so I just assumed that he was probably thinking of letting them meet sometime. But I wondered why he didn't have his dog outside with him at this moment. In the end, I just went back inside quickly after Harley was done. Now my younger brother lives in the same complex as I do, but on the second floor, and he told me that every now and then he'd see that man take his dog out into his backyard, but cross the tree line into the complex yard. He would circle the building slowly a little too close to the building before going back into his house. In September of last year, my boyfriend at the time and I split up the night that I told him to leave. I went to a friend's house to vent. I didn't want to leave Harley home alone too long. So after about an hour or so, I came back to my apartment. I knocked out on the couch while I had a black screen rain sound video on YouTube on. I woke up at around 2, and Tule going absolutely crazy though, barking and growling. The other couch is right under the main window in my living room. Harley had climbed up the couch and was barking at the window between the curtains. I get up to get her down and to be quiet when my stomach dropped when I realized something. The curtains are on the thinner side, and I can normally faintly see the street lights from the next street over through the curtains. I started getting a little bit nervous, realizing that there was a black mass blocking some of the lights above where Harley was standing. I grabbed the remote to shut the TV off while I was getting closer to the window. The TV turns off in the sort of style of retro TVs, where the picture sort of closes in on itself. When I turned it off, the flash animation on the TV illuminated the room briefly, and it was enough that I was able to make out the form of someone dressed in black or dark clothes crouched down looking into my window in the flash. They probably saw me too, because they ran away quickly here. I picked up Harley and ran to the kitchen to grab a knife and went to my room, and I locked the door. I texted my ex asking if he was outside of the window just then, and he replied no and asked what was happening. I didn't believe him, though, because he's never awake that late, and told him that I was about to call the police, so to just tell me the truth and all that. But he told me that I should call them either way and sent me his live location showing that he was at his friend's house over an hour away. I called the police and let them know that I had seen someone outside of my window. They came and looked around, finding nothing, obviously. An officer did tell me, though, that they would keep somebody in the area, so to just call back if anything else happened over the next couple of weeks. Around the same time, 2 or 3 a.m. each night, Harley would freak out at the window by the time that I would get there. I couldn't see anyone outside, though. Fast forward now to May of 2024. This last week I went through my storage closet and found some of my ex's things. I was out with some friends. Tonight, when he came to pick them up, he ended up texting me to come home so that we could talk about something important. I get home and I notice that he has a sort of puzzled look on his face. I asked what couldn't have been just texted to me, and he told me that while he was loading his stuff in his truck, he took Harley out quick and he was approached by an older lady that lives on the second floor. Now the dumpster is at the end of the parking lot, and if you turn right, you'll face the side of the building. In the general area outside of my living room window, there's a few big trees keeping the area back there pretty dark even during the summer. It's pretty much deeply shaded. And she said that as she was taking her trash out, she heard a twig snap or something like that and looked in the direction that it came from. She said that she saw a man outside of my window, not just walking around. He was up close, peering into my living room, one hand up on the window, trying to block the light so that he could see, and his phone in the other hand, pointing inside of my apartment. She yelled out asking him what the heck he was doing, but he just acted like he didn't hear her and walked away slowly in the opposite direction. She said that it would have been one thing if he was just walking through the yard and sort of glanced over at my window, but he was apparently full on pressing his face against the glass, looking at and recording. Allegedly, my blood instantly ran cold and I got goosensed. I have since then bought a Ring camera, which is honestly something I should have done a long time ago, but I'll update if anything else happens. So please do wish me luck. So me and my husband decided to go to a lookout spot that is known for paranormal. It's called Doomlights. It's known for colored orbs that will fly around in the sky with no particular pattern, and they are apparently all different colors as well, and I've seen them twice. Scientists have come and can't find any explanation for them, but that's not what this is about. This place is deep in a wooded area on top of a mountain that you can see for miles. When you get to the top, where the lookout is, it's about a 45-minute to an hour drive from our home. We left a little after 11 p.m. and it was a pretty clear night that night. Well, but by the time that we reached our destination at the top, a huge storm had come out of pretty much nowhere. It was lightning and thundering and raining really hard as well. It had been my idea to go there, but as soon as my husband turned off the truck, I was stuck with a fear. I began to cry and told him that I wanted to go. He asked me why and I just kept telling him that I didn't know why, but I didn't want to be there anymore. So we started to drive back down the winding dirt road. About halfway down the mountain, lightning struck. It was so close that I jumped to the floorboard of the truck and my husband threw on the brakes. I said, "What the heck?" He said that the lightning nearly hit the truck. At that point, I climbed back up onto my seat as he began moving again, and I spotted something glowing red, about maybe 15 ft into the woods. I couldn't pull my eyes away, because it felt like it was looking at us too. It was completely black, except for its red eyes. It had something similar to pointing bat, like ears and wings that were tucked behind on its back, but you could see them over its shoulder, its pointy wings. It was about 3 feet tall and was in mid-stride. When we spotted it, was the feeling that it brought with it that was so scary. I felt heavy, thick, darkness, like the whole world had gone dark. Black sort of feeling, and that's the only way to explain it, like nothing I'd ever felt before afterward. It felt like something was poking around in my head as well, and I now realized that, whatever it was, I think it was trying to read my thoughts but couldn't, and was slightly annoyed by that. I really don't know how else to explain that feeling as well, but my eyes and its eyes were still locked. It was only a few seconds, but it seemed like time just wasn't even moving as we continued driving past. Neither one of us, me or my husband, said anything for a few seconds. Quietly, without looking at my husband, though, I whispered, "Did you see that?" He looked at me and said, "You saw it too?" I said yes. And then he looked at me and said what the heck was that we were driving fast now, trying to get out of these woods and away from that mountain. I said that it was a demon. I think, and my husband doesn't much believe in things like that, but he said that he never wanted to think or talk about it ever again. It scared him, and I could tell he doesn't get scared by much. But he just didn't know what it was, I guess, and his words were, it was nothing good and not from this world. We've talked about it every now and then, and we even thought about it later. It was just a few seconds after the lightning had almost struck our truck as well, and it had to be somehow connected to. It was too weird for the lightning, and then, for a second later, that thing to appear like that mid-stride in the woods. It wasn't just coincidence is what I'm getting at. I'm pretty firmly committed, too, that it was a demon, because the feelings that surrounded it were dark and turned everything dark around it as well. I just want to know, though, what demon it would be. I guess I've looked for years now online and never found anything that looked like it. I'm also thinking that those pointy ears were actually black horns, and maybe not ears at all. It didn't have any features on its face, just the eyes glowing red, pointy wings folded back and all black. It had 2 legs, obviously because it was walking on them. It was about 3 and 1/2 feet tall, but it was absolutely terrifying. It seemed intelligent too, because it saw us and it was thinking just like we were. I could tell by its eyes. I don't know how I know that, but I just do, and maybe it told me in a way that it just popped into my mind. Or whatever the case, it seemed just as intelligent as we are, actually perhaps even smarter than we are, I suppose. But anyway, could anyone else please tell me if they know about this creature? Maybe the place is daylight, and I think it might be a place for things to pass through easier, like a portal or something. If you know anything else that might be helpful as well, then please do let me know. I'm truly very curious to find out why we came across this thing, and if it came through with the lightning or something. I know that this all sounds crazy, but if you've been through something like this, then you know how just disconcerting it really is. This happened last winter. A fog starts sitting in my city at the time of sunset, and it gets really dark pretty quickly here now. My university has a policy of not interfering in anything that happens outside, even if it's right outside the gate, in front of the guards and all that. And a few days before my stare down, there was some talk going around about a student's phone getting snatched right outside of on or whatever. One day, though, me and my boyfriend were sitting in the car outside, right beside the college wall, and around 20 m away from the college gate. He wanted to use the restroom, asked me to come inside with him, but I was like, no, I'm just too tired and you go and I'll wait here. So he went, leaving his phone with me. I was using my phone sitting inside on the full brightness setting when suddenly a bike leaned towards the car. The 2 men sitting on had those ski masks on and started tapping the car window on the driver's side with a gun. It's important to note that the passenger side, where I was sitting, was right beside gutter, so they couldn't come too close to me. They backed off and again came forward, tapping the window, looking at me through the windshield and motioning for me to roll down the window. But honestly, I was way too stunned to do anything, and eventually they just drove away when they saw other people approaching. When they saw other people approaching, all I wanted to do was save my boyfriend's phone, which was under my thigh. So mission accomplished, I guess. But sometimes I wonder, if those people hadn't have showed up when they did, what might have actually happened? As a Muslim, we believe that those entities that anyone encounters, such as ghosts, poltergeist, apparitions, etc., they're all jinn, and some of them just there to scare people for the sake of P-ranking. Others, Messors, though, are absolutely evil and might literally harm you, like scratching, or perhaps even worse. With that said, a long time ago I was staying at a relative's house. He was my uncle. He had a wife and 2 kids, and they had a decent house, nothing big or anything. But keep in mind that the apartment is on the ground floor and you might hear kids playing or yelling outside. They keep the window open quite often as well. But anyway, I was there alone at some point, and they had gone out to the mall with my mother. I didn't want to join because it would have been boring to join them, so I decided to stay and just play video games that day, and the night started fine. Some time passed, though, and that was when I started hearing some noises, my kids talking. I brushed it off, though, as I thought that it could have been some of the kids outside, as I mentioned before. But I kept hearing it louder and louder and louder, and I went to check the window, but there wasn't a single person outside. So I decided to shut the window and go back to my game. Some time passed and I started hearing children talking and yelling. This time, though, it was a little bit louder again, as if someone was inside the house at that. I got startled and I began to check around, only to find absolutely nothing. When I sat down again and I went back to playing, the noises started up again. This time it was getting louder and louder as well, and I had a headset back then I put it on. It was connected to the monitor so that I could hear the game. The noises became so loud that, even with the headset on, I could still hear it. And mind you, I was completely terrified at this point, and just like that, the noises just stopped all of a sudden, and it was then that I felt someone pulling the back of my shirt up. I jumped up like I'd never jumped before, and I just ran out of the house. From that day on, too, I never went back to that house again, and when I opened the door, I found my father outside of the house about to ring the door. He looked at my face and asked what was wrong. I told him the story, but he didn't believe me. However, he told me not to bring that up to my relatives, so I wouldn't be disrespectful. When I saw my mother, I told her the story, and by the look on her face, I could tell that she believed every word that I had said, because later I found out that my relatives used to do some CS in this house, and even his wife and children used to experience stuff too. Needless to say, that was one of the most terrifying experiences that I had ever had, and since then I tried my best to never get scared of encounters like that. I've had other experiences after that, such as noises and taps and similar stuff, but I learned that if you pay them no mind and you don't show any fear, that eventually they just leave you alone anyway. I hope you enjoyed my story, and it's certainly something that sticks with me. I really hope, too, that nothing like this ever happens again. I lived in a haunted house at a really early age, though. Despite this, my memory remains fresh of most of these encounters. We were there for a year, so I must have been 3 or 4 during this. I lived with my older brother, older than me by 3 years, younger sister, younger by 3 years, so just a baby at that time, mother and father. The house looked overgrown. Thin vines grew on the walls, large bushes in front of the windows, and it was fenced in the front, with a large gate circling the backyard. The hauntings, though, they started pretty quickly. My mom, for instance, would hear heavy boot stomps up the stairs despite nobody being there. My father would get locked out of the house despite nobody being inside, and my brother would hear doors opening. But I definitely got the worst of it. I was looking out of my window watching my mother go to work. She had a double shift and my dad wasn't the best at that, to put it lightly, but I stared until I noticed a large pitch black snake following her to her car. The snake looked to be double her in length, despite its slithering, thus curling its body. My mother is 5'8", which makes the snake probably around 11 long, but it had followed her for a couple of minutes until she had gotten into her car. Then it slithered back into the bushes near my window. I looked down to see it looking right at me. Despite this, though, I would still go outside and play, like other kids, playing in the backyard till dusk. My brother and I were playing separately. My brother, loving sports, ran around throwing the football, whereas I played with one of my toy animals. The one in specific was a big T-Rex that I had. The T-Rex looked like one of the older renditions before Jurassic Park, upright, with its tail dragged in the ground. And as the song said further, our mother called us inside for dinner. So we went inside and I noticed that I had left my toy and went to go and get. It was dark to the point where I couldn't really make out the noticeable color, but not too dark, so as I couldn't see outlines and the detail of objects and all that. I noticed the T-Rex chilling right by the tree where I had left it. I went to go and pick it up only for it to crumble because it was dirt in the shape of the T-Rex. I got freaked out and then I ran back inside. Now notice earlier that I said that I can remember most of these encounters. But the reason why I point this out is because my father said that he'd often see me sitting in the corner of my room or in the front of a blank screen. He'd ask me what I was doing and I would simply say that the old man told me to. I have no recollection of these happening, but my father swears up and down that this happened more than a few times. But this last one was definitely the most horrific. So waking up in the middle of the night, I heard footsteps. Luckily my TV was on, so I still had some light, but thinking that it was my dad, I got up to go to see him. But when I opened the door, there was just an old man standing there. He looked down at me and honestly looked corpse-like. I freaked out and I banged on my mother's bedroom door. She opened and I hollered about how there was an ugly man in the house. She took it as someone actually breaking in, and she picked me up with one hand and had a bat in the other and basically ran around the house, turning every light on and cussing loud enough to worry some of our neighbors. But in the end we never found anyone in the house. I still very much remember, though, looking at that guy, and he was real, like as real as my mom was, and I just cannot explain it. Anyways, those are my encounters from this place that I've always found the scariest and the ones that have always stuck with me the most. So I don't believe in ghosts or paranormal stuff. I think that most of the stuff that you read online or you hear about is fictional or made up. But with that said, here is my experience from working at an elder care. So my shift always ended at 11 p.m. So at 10:30 p.m., the corridors are always silent and dark. Everyone has asleep and we're just sitting in our office and sipping some tea. Me and my colleague. We have motion detectors in every room installed and they're connected to our working phones. And we can see live feed from the phones as well. All of a sudden, though, at 10:35, I get a notification of movement in a patient's room. I was only 19 and I told my other colleague that there is no way in heck that I'm going in there to check it out on my own. So I was there for 3 nights. It was my first time in Venice and I loved it. I was there with friends, but due to our poor planning, all 4 of us stayed in different hotels. I chose one near the station, which was an intimate hotel ran by a religious family. It was a classic old villa facing a canal, and the place had a chapel as well, a garden and full of religious merch and decorations throughout. My room was on the 2nd floor. You had to climb 3 sets of stairs and on the top you were met with a marble square lobby with a round table in the middle. There were 4 rooms around this lobby, and the rest of the rooms continued on to corridors that stretched on either side of the lobby. My room was one of the rooms attached to this lobby. A single room that looked over the canal. It was a simple small room composed of a single bed with a cross above the head, a basin, and a wardrobe. It was a cheap and cheerful hotel and I slept like a baby. The first 2 nights I was there, but on my 3rd and final night I had trouble getting to sleep and the loud neighbor who was watching videos didn't help. But I had to bang on their wall around 1 a.m., after which they stopped and I fell asleep. But I remember feeling uneasy and agitated that night. For some reason I eventually woke up sometime around at 3:30 to 4:30, which wasn't unusual for me, as I don't sleep that well. But that was when I heard a group of loud wailing people in the building. It echoed into my room via the hall. At this point I remember thinking that the source of this noise was either coming from the stairs or the bottom of it. I was initially annoyed thinking that there were a bunch of drunkards who came in after night out or whatever. Then it suddenly hit me that the hotel had a 12 a.m. curfew. It was unlikely a GR group of people suddenly coming out of their rooms to cause a commotion as well. Eventually I came to my senses, which made me more aware of this mysterious wailing. It was loud, almost in despair, and crescendo and over and over and over, echoing into the lobby. I eventually realized that this was, or they were definitely not human. It's hard to explain, but something in me knew by the sound that whatever this was not alive in one form or another, and humans could just not really make this noise. I had never, ever felt like this before and it was a strange experience. But then the wailing finally stopped. I was relieved. But what happened next is something that I will never forget. The sound resumed, but this time from the foot of my bed. This thing or these things were wailing in my room at the foot of my bed. Very much present, closer and louder. I don't know what happened after that, because as soon as I heard them, I just blacked out or passed out, and I woke up on the floor at around 7 in the morning. To my surprise, I didn't feel as scared until later on in the day, where I tried to recap what on earth happened to this day. I still cannot explain what this was. Thank you so much for joining me in the world of midnight dark stories. I hope these tales have sent shivers down your spine and sparked your imagination. Remember to subscribe, like, and share your scariest thoughts in the comments. Until the next time we meet in the darkness, keep the thrill alive.